Very good morning to you all. It's an absolute pleasure to have a lot of the early ones, a lot of the early guys that have just jumped onto the call. We're quickly hitting some good numbers as we go up. Please, as you enter the virtual meeting room, tell us your name in the chat. You can select all panelists and attendees. As you do so, tell us your name, tell us where you're dialing from, perhaps which business. If you're outside South Africa, even a country would be good. So good morning. If you're just joining us, say hi, select all panelists and attendees in the chat, please, so that everybody can see who you are as you come in. We are getting ourselves ready and lined up. I have my two guests with me. We get ready for our case study, the Anglo Dimago case study. We're really looking forward to this piece today, and to have a quick look at an internal audit team, how they've refocused and on risk-based tasks. So once again, good morning. If you're just joining us, I can see a few familiar names. Josias is here, Alan Gordon, very good morning, all the way from Borley in London. It's great to have you in the session. And I've got some of my colleagues from CFO-SA who are, again, mentioning, when you post on the chat, tell us, please select, first of all, select all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your message. And as we go throughout the morning, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them as well in the chat. And again, by selecting all panelists and attendees. Good morning, Martin. Good to have you here and all the way from Mpumalanga. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've reached what they call a quorum for us to perhaps kick us off. So I think if you're here to listen into the Anglo American case study with Dimago, you're in the right place. If you stumbled on the wrong webinar, please feel free to stick around. Perhaps you might learn a thing or two. I look forward to some very exciting insights from my two guests here today. So Anglo American recently implemented an audit data analytics solution from Alteryx in internal audit. This implementation delivered the analytics promise. The team is now focused on adding value rather than on mundane day-to-day functions of audit, right? So we're talking a lot more value creation that has come out of this. So it's a team of 12, can cover more scope in less time, perform audit testing on 100% of populations instead of drawing samples, and spend more time on risk-based tasks. So with that, joining me, you perhaps already know, I've got Anglo American Stijn Litjes, who's the data analytics lead. He will take us through what they've done, how they're able to achieve this 100% of population in most instances. But I'll also call on Pierre Naude, who's the CEO of Dimago, to help us unpack this onion a bit further. He's the South African reseller and supporter of Alteryx, and will detail the pain points facing South African audit teams and how analytics can solve these kind of problems. So great to have you all here. And without further ado, I wanted to call on Stijn to take us away and show us what this is all about. Stijn, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Let me just share my screen and prepare a few slides to take you all through. So I'm Stijn Litjes. I sit in ABAS, which is kind of our assurance business services function. So that includes internal audit, but also risk management, ethical business conduct, investigations. So really the broader sense of assurance activities. And In Anglo, we have, I joined Anglo about a year and a half ago. I previously have a Big Four background. And I was kind of brought in to kickstart the data analytics journey for ABAS, for a function. And that's what I wanted to talk to you today about, to see how we've done that and how we've worked together with different technologistic solutions to make that into a success, and where we are now. So when maybe taking a step back, if we look at data analytics, one of the key things is getting access to the right data. Seems obvious, but it sometimes is not so very easy to get that. So in our high-level approach was to first create like a central information repository to get all the data together. And that doesn't mean just for us as audit, but actually across the business. So we're working together with the finance function, with our health, safety and environment functions, with our HR functions to actually create common data sets that we can use for a variety of use cases and not just for audit. So that's kind of our key of that collaboration piece where we start off with. And then when we have that data, we can go in two different ways. So one is actually, data enabling ourselves. So making sure what Brian was referring to, being more effective and efficient in providing assurance activities, and by using data analytics, and therefore also delivering that extra business value. But secondly, we can also then bring that analytics to the business because we have that more process level view. We can look across the whole process, in which some functions only see part of the process. So take, for example, P2P, where you probably have a separate procurement function from accounts payable, and maybe there's a separate accounting function. And so if you're from a risk perspective, you can look across those. So therefore, we can bring some additional value there and maybe embed that into the business. But I'll talk a bit about that later again. So where were we about a year and a half ago? So we didn't really use data analytics. All data analytics was, not real data analytics. If people say, if you ask people, do you do data analytics? And they say, well, I do things in Excel. I don't really consider that data analytics, right? So we're actually talking about using proper tools, working from databases, doing different kinds of things to enable the data analytics. So where we were was we weren't actually able to see, as far as a full population. We didn't sometimes even know what the populations were. Therefore, if we want to do testing, we need to do a lot of manual testing. What was quite a high cost in operating. You could only cover a fairly small scope. Also, when you do an audit, you generally look, you look over maybe over the last year. So you're always back looking. So if you get a report and that report is drawn and you look at it a month and a half later, and you issue your report, then it's kind of out of date already. It could be that it's not the true state anymore of the business. So also that was kind of an issue. And that unreliability kind of points to the fact, where we have what is the true version of events, and if we look at the data, what is actually going on, and that's why that central information repository I talked about earlier, the previous slide, is so important to make sure that is in place. And like many other organizations, our IT organization is very complex. We've got thousands of different applications, multiple different ERPs. We run a lot on SAP, but even in SAP, we have a variety of different SAP instances, different consolidation systems, different planning systems, and they all need to you all need to get information out of those to get an audit across the whole process. And then also transparency. So, what can we get from the data? What can we see? And what are the key controls across those business units? Are they the same between the business units? So all those kind of things are what we didn't really have insight to, and that's what we wanted to solve with data analytics. So take you to the next slide. It's kind of explaining what our future state vision is for where we want to move towards. So this is not actually where we are yet, but we're on our way to get there. So we've implemented a new audit management system where we host pretty much all audits for the whole group, and we manage that there, including risk management. We have a separate GRC tool where we have all first and second line assurance activity and consolidated there. So we kind of have two key sources of information when we do it with. The GRC space is still a bit spread out across the business, but working towards getting that also data available, even if it sits in different applications. So what we want to do is actually, if you look at the last 5 and 6, what we want to do is more rely on the second line of defense, so we can free up our hands to look more risk-based things. And it kind of comes down to making sure that you don't have to do as much traditional transaction-based testing. So by kind of building that tool that has the controls in it, we can automatically, in step 1, send control emails and email when they need to do something. That can be both, control has to be operated on a monthly basis, but it could also be an ad hoc when there's certain events happens, like something is raised or like a PO is raised that has a segregation of duties issue with it. You could right away trigger an email that sends out that to the control owners to perform it. Then the second step is all the controls actually is exception. We try to build exception-based reporting. So, and that's what you see in the dashboard in the bottom of the slide. So if we have a dashboard where people can already see their exceptions, then they can draw a report from that dashboard that shows actually what those exceptions are. So let's say you do balance sheet reconciliation. You actually don't want to do the whole balance sheet reconciliation yourself. You want to build an analytic that does it for you and only spits out the exceptions. And you can download those exceptions, fill in the slides. Okay, I've filed this up. This might be a timing issue, or this might be another issue why it's not reconciling. And then you can upload that back into the dashboard and feed that into the analytics itself. So you can not only see, what the issue was, but also how the control owner followed it up and what they did with it. And another benefit is that on the number 4 is that you right away store that control evidence. So when you store it, and when you come back as audit or as second line, you don't have to go have painful documentation requests and saying like, oh, can you provide that? And then you don't get exactly what you need, so you have to request it again. And now we know for those controls, they're already centrally stored, and we can actually look at those right away. And because that transparency is there, you can actually enable your second line of defense, so your risk management, your compliance functions, so everybody that does second line activities, to really monitor that process. So then you go from the point of risk reporting more to risk management, right? You can right away address issues that when they occur. And because if that works and that this is not and will be done in one go, right? So it needs iterations to refine this. But when this works well, you can really kind of as internal step away. You're not actually finding things anymore, or at least not on a transactional level. And you can think about, more about the strategic issues, roadmaps. Where are we going to? Are we doing the right things in the business? Instead of checking, do we have retrospective purchase orders? Find that, follow up on it. This should actually already, if we have that available, why not give that back to the business so they can do that. Then just talking about data analytics in internal audit. So when people think of where do we use data analytics, they generally think about the middle box, field work. So yes, you can use data analytics to test your full population. You can test, do smart things to do exception testing, but actually that might not even be the place where it's most valued. It will give you most efficiency, but maybe not most value. So a lot of other functions you see they use for reporting already. So, putting it into Tableau or Power BI or ClickView or any other visualization tool to present the findings. But you can also think about, your planning and your risk assessment phases. So where do we see risk becoming higher? If we monitor processes on an ongoing basis and we see that there's exceptions not being picked up or more exceptions being raised, or that can already help you in scoping where you want to look at. And as I said, if you get to a point where you have that monitoring, you're kind of sitting in this continuous auditing space, right? So you've probably heard quite a lot about that. But it doesn't mean anything more than having your direct data streams going, you're testing it through a script basis, and you can right away see on a continuous basis what findings you have. And then when you can build that in a way that it has not very much false positives, so that it doesn't take actually a long time to follow up anymore, there's actually no reason to not give that back to the business. Right, so we're trying to see when we build something and we want to keep in the back of our mind, not just delivering assurance, but also actually delivering value. Can we build something that the business can use as well, so that we don't have to come by and find issues, that they can actually enable them to fix them themselves? But you do need to have like small amount of false positives for that. Otherwise, you'll just trailing through analytics. And in Audit, you have more time for that. When you look in detail the process, but in the common business, sometimes you don't. So on this slide, I put kind of, now we know, what that we want to do analytics. We know what our goal is. We know where we want to move to, but how are we actually going to do that? So what does that look like? Definitely, it would be good to have somebody that has done this before. So I've been in the data team in the Big Four, so I know kind of how to work these projects. But having somebody that has gone through the cycles of building data analytics is quite helpful to have. So we kind of set up this circle to illustrate what we're doing. So we identify audits that are potential for data analytics. So that could be your complete audit universe with audits that you're scoping. But generally, you want to look at what audits will give us a lot of value to do with data analytics, and which audits are ripe for data analytics. So that's in your red arrow. So the value is things like, are we covering our biggest risks? Are we giving insights where there's no insights gained yet? So all those kind of things. Can we tie data sources together that nobody's done before? Can we give insights that weren't there before? And ripeness is things like, if we have transactional data that's more suitable for data analytics than configurational data. Can we actually access these systems easily? Do we have the people in the business that understand how those data models work? Do we know which tables hold that data that we're interested in? So if you have no knowledge about it, then it's custom built system or very old system that are coded maybe still in COBOL. It's very hard to understand where the data sits or to get it out. Relational databases on SQL servers are much easier again than non-relational databases, for example. So you set your requirements, identify data sources, you agree your approach, both internally with the team and with the clients, and you start designing and building your solution. And this is really also an iterative process. So you will need to try to be a bit more agile. So yes, you do know where you want to go to, but you will find that there's quite intricacies in the data or in the process that you weren't aware of, or that you didn't get from the walkthroughs that you were doing. To really, so you need to kick the tires a bit, and refine those analytics as you go to make sure that at the end you have actually a fairly accurate view of what it looks like. And then when you have that refined and validated, then you can start automating it. So instead of feeding in the data once, you're just feeding it on an ongoing basis and building it into a dashboard and publishing it. So you can keep doing that. And the last one is documenting and learn. A typical thing in audit, maybe not so typical in the rest of the business, but really getting a detailed understanding so managers are able to review it, even if they cannot read any code or if they don't have any data background, to really make it understandable for everybody. Two more slides. One I put in around underlying technology, just kind of how we will work. So we use mostly puts our source system into a different data repository. So that's a lot of times our data lake, which is run on Azure, or for SAP data, it sits on our HANA database. And from there on, we use either Alteryx or Databricks or a combination to really build common data models. So to make sure that, you know, that we have that common understanding that we have the same data we use across the business. Those are persisted then in the same lake, and then we can use a variety of different sources to do analytics on. One of them is Alteryx, but we also use some of the other tools. So you see a process mining tool from Celonis, but we can also code raw in R, SQL, Python. But you know, I think that the highlight here is that for most of our things we use Alteryx, because a lot of the people that work on data analytics within ABAS are actually from origin not data scientists or data analysts. They're actually auditors. So what I've done in the last pretty much now a year on a weekly basis, we have kind of learning sessions where we run through different use cases, and we're enabling our auditors with Alteryx to perform their own data analytics. So now there's 12 people we've identified as our most data savvy internal auditors, been trained up, and now can independently run analytics with pretty much without my help, which massively increases the breadth and scope of analytics we can build and pick up. Then when we built that, we pushed into either a SQL Server or another data warehouse, and then we connected to Power BI, which is our sort of preferred enterprise tool at the moment, and visualize those results. And then we have that loop with the Alteryx server, right? So we schedule those analytics that we've built that run, that data automatically feeds in, it runs, and it will give you a live view of the data. And the user can interact with that by feeding in their information. And then we can add that to the dashboard. So we can add with apps that we can develop on the Alteryx server. We can have users give input into those dashboards, or when they perform controls, or any other input really. And then the outcomes is, so as I said, we upskill 12 our data savvy auditors in Alteryx. And why we chose Alteryx is because it's quite a powerful tool. It's easy to use. So it's, if you want to train up auditors, or just I guess any person, it's a very big step to just say, you know, here you go learn and code in R or in Python or in SQL. You have to literally learn a new language. You have to be a bit good at logic or maths, and sometimes that's quite hard. But I think if you have like a data savvy business user, you can teach them Alteryx, and you can actually quite easily upskill them, and you can let them do all the basic things that you would want to do. But even for you know, really advanced use cases, because it's visual, we can really create advanced ETL capability, which we have some brilliant use cases for. So even for people that are quite advanced, it's still a good tool to build things. Now for year one, we're covering 35% of the audits with data or data analytics, from pretty much 1 or 2%, so up from 1 or 2%. So that's a brilliant increase. And in the first year, we're really building those, you know, those broad data models to, so for future years, we can build on top of that and expand that. There's some other use cases, because I've been working with Beyond Finance, which is a big finance transformation project where that's happening across the business. And also there, you know, where we've put use cases to work to make sure that, you know, people are not just doing mundane, non-judgmental tasks, that we can easily consolidate information, and we can just enable people to do more meaningful jobs and not just push data around by automating it. and to be able to self-serve themselves instead of having to wait for the IT department. They can actually join some data themselves, where things like Excel are either not flexible enough, or where just a VLOOKUP won't cut it, which is quite quickly already. So yeah, that's really I think what we've done in the last year and a half at Anglo, Brian.
Thank you for that case study, Stijn. I'm going to give you a quick breather, but I will rope you in the next bit shortly. But for now, I wanted to just kind of create a foundation for this conversation, because we've been hearing Alteryx, Dimago, etc. So I'm going to call up Pierre. And Pierre, perhaps will start off with telling us, about Dimago to get us going.
Sure thing. Thanks, Brian. Morning, and to all the attendees, and thanks for Stijn for those really great insights, and also for the chat about his board games in the top left corner that he's got there. Back to where we had a good chat about strategic board games and how that can actually flow into the audit world from a strategy point of view. Maybe that's for another webinar. But as a quick intro, we're a data analytics business and passionate about helping people in business unleash the power of the data. And I think that that shows up in what Stijn was talking about, and how he's been able to enable his team to use a tool like Alteryx and to deliver significant value to the business with a very low consulting cost, or almost nothing. I mean, we were involved with Stijn in the beginning with some more complex Alteryx work, but he's taken that on and championed it, and been able to train up a team of 12 developers, and that's really what we focus on in our organizations. How do we scale up the capability of people to deliver more value? So we work a bit different to your standard consulting businesses, in that we want to enable people in finance and business teams to deliver the analysis of data and reporting themselves through the use of modern self-service technologies, and predominantly around Alteryx. So we enable our clients across business teams to use the Alteryx, which helps them to become not just people that are preparing information, but actually become advanced data analysts and even citizen data scientists, adding more insights and more value to their business. So we hear a lot of people using, trying to use Excel, which is just, from a pure data volume point of view, doesn't work. It's complex and time consuming, all the way through to robotic process automation, or trying to skill up in Python or SQL. But these are just, too technical or too cumbersome for finance teams and business people to manage. And the tools are out there. We've chosen Alteryx specifically because its breadth of capability, and the fact that you can, all the way end to end, from connecting to a data source all the way to actually producing an analytic or a data science model. We've selected Alteryx. The tools are out there and available, and we want to enable people to actually drive these changes within their organizations. So that's us as a brief overview.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pierre. Before I kind of get into the next piece, I just wanted to encourage our attendees, if they have any questions, please, you can post them in the chat. Remember to select all attendees and panelists in the section. We will get to a section where we can try and address some of those questions for you. But if anything has come up from Stijn's presentation and some of the stuff we're talking about now, please feel free to post a question in the chat and let us know. Pierre, I want us to just go a bit deeper into Alteryx uses specifically, right? Is there anything more that you can tell us about it?
Yeah, so Alteryx is a leader in a space called analytics and process automation, and we use it for discovery of data. So thinking about a data source that you've never seen before, even to talk about outliers, you want to investigate exceptions in the data set, being able to connect to a data set and quickly discover and unpack what's in that data. And then prepare information. Maybe you want to join then that data set with another data set to come up with additional insights, things you would typically do in a VLOOKUP in Excel or a join in SQL. and then analyze that information. How can we overlay machine learning capabilities and more advanced analytics onto that data? And then how do we then deploy and share this analytics at scale across an organization for deeper insights? And those are the basic buckets. We use Alteryx predominantly, and where we're seeing it predominantly used in our clients, because we obviously aren't involved in every use case, because it's very heavily used by the actual business users. So data management is a big one. So when I say data management, so data quality, data cleansing, we get this a lot. Even data migration work. So how do we get data from one source to another? In the SAP environment, there's a huge amount of SAP ECC to SAP HANA migrations. People are moving from Microsoft AX on-premise to in the cloud. So how do we actually move these data sets and cleanse them in the process? We're doing quite a bit of that. We're seeing quite a bit of that in our clients. Data heavy or data complex process automation. So data heavy, I mean, almost every client we talk to, we've got a 50 meg or 40 meg or 300 meg Excel spreadsheet that we click and the wheel turns and we let it run. How do we make that process a bit easier and faster for us? So data heavy, so very, very big data loads, or data complex processing, multiple steps, multiple tabs, different workbooks. And actually how to bring those all together in an automated process. So that we do a lot. And then moving into advanced analytics and machine learning. I mean, these are all terms that are being used and thrown around widely. What value can they actually add to an organization and without needing a very experienced, skilled data science team delivering those results. So how's it different? Alteryx is a workflow-based application. And what that means is you use building blocks or tools within the application. You drag and drop onto a canvas, much like your great art piece in the back there, Brian. But a blank canvas, you drag and drop the tools onto a blank canvas, and you start from scratch. So it's really, what is it we need to do with the data? And we use a bunch of these building blocks to actually build out a workflow and come up with the result. The real difference is that this workflow is repeatable. So it's not something you have to drag and drop every time like you would with an Excel workbook. Once this workflow is built, it's done. You click a button and you run, and that's the key. It's we're building this thing once, and we're then letting it just run and automate. And that's some of the value we're seeing.
Wow, yeah. So I really like that. I mean, it sounds like a wide array of uses. I mean, you mentioned data management, complex process automation, etc. So quite an array of uses. That's very interesting to know. Stijn, I want to bring you back in quickly. You've had a quick breather from your presentation, and I'm asked a cheeky two-part question. Maybe let us know, let the audience know. Do all kind of projects that you need to be major deliverables? That's the first part, but also, when is it an agile and when is it formalized?
That's good. Good question. So on your first one, no, not everything has to be a very long project. Sometimes it's really easy to just, as Pierre said, you have a few data sources, even if it's sometimes in Excel, right? You just have sheets for the whole year. You just chuck them quickly in there. You do a quick data exploration, and that can be, you can build something up, analytics in a day or in a day and a half to already get some results and get it visualized. But in the nature of the audit is generally that what you are going to. So you have your set risks and your set controls which you want to test, and therefore you build tests on top for those. You kind of know where you're going to. So you follow a bit more, I guess, a waterfall approach compared to an agile approach. But as I said, it really is an iterative approach. So it is important to kick the tires, make sure that your analytics are actually showing you what you want them to show, so that they do what they are designed to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's good. Thanks, Stijn. It adds further clarity. I know you had touched on this part before, so I just thought we would expand a bit. Pierre, you know, I just want to come back to you. You know, we've got a use case or a case study here, and it's coming from a big organization, right? A major conglomerate in the game. So you know, I just wanted to get a sense, or at least know, how applicable is Alteryx, you know, to smaller businesses? Is it a case of one size fits all?
Yeah, so I mean, our clients include companies from, you know, from a single person or just a few employees or a few individuals to some of the largest global businesses like Anglo American and Standard Bank. And our focus is really about looking at the challenges that individuals face within the business and what they're struggling to do on a daily basis with the processing of data, or they're frustrated because they're not adding much value. We hear this a lot. And that they feel they could be adding more value to organizations. And that really starts with an individual, or can start with an individual. It doesn't need to be a big platform, you know, hundreds of people at a time. So we very often, and most often, actually start with one person in the business. We find somebody that's really struggling with a, you know, like I've said before, 300 meg Excel spreadsheet that just doesn't want to open and doesn't want to work. And we look at finding a way to transform the way they operate and what they're able to do in their business. And we start with that, and then you can grow from there. And it's very much organic in how it grows. And Stijn's also come from a, you know, previous experience with Alteryx, but see what he's been able to do now within this business is train up a team of 12 people, and those people will talk about it and eventually expand the use across the organization, and it grows like that. And I think Alteryx stories globally talk to this as well. I mean, one I think was from UBS Bank. They went from just one user to over 20,000 in a matter of years. And you can imagine what 20,000 users doing what Stijn's mentioned with a team of 12, what that's able to deliver in a big business. So it's from one person all the way up to 20,000. The likes of, you know, PwC have trained over 85,000, I think, users within their business. So it's really from the smallest to the absolute largest.
Great, Pierre, and I want to stay with you for a bit, just because, you know, you spoke about trends and changing requirements and needs and growing business, and perhaps my next point really speaks to the trends in IA specifically, and how you see Alteryx helping in some of these areas.
Yeah, so from the teams we're engaging with at the moment, it's, you know, there are a couple of key points that are coming out. You know, completeness and accuracy, continuous auditing is a big one. And then also, obviously, a lot of what we're talking about today around tools and automation and how is that actually being done. So from a completeness and accuracy standpoint, as Stijn mentioned, they've been able to move from, you know, sampling to full population. And this is obviously a big win and something that has to be addressed. The tools are now available to do that. There's no point in doing sampling anymore. It's very easy to do full population testing with if you have access to the data and with the right tools. So we can absolutely process massive amounts of data using Alteryx, you know, millions of rows, and we can automate those processes. So, you know, that's a big win, not having to rely on sampling to pick up exceptions, but actually being able to build algorithmic rules, and that will highlight issues on an ongoing basis, and things that you can then improve over time and become more and more refined. And that flows directly into the continuous auditing piece. Once you've built a model that can highlight exceptions, you can then very easy automate that and then run that on a daily basis if you need to. So, you know, if they're fraudulent transactions, or, you know, some things we come across quite a lot around in big businesses, payments of employees that are suppliers as well. So matching up bank account details, these kind of things you can build in and actually pick them up every day as payment runs go, rather than actually trying to sample them at the end of a period or a quarter or something like that. So build these processes into continuous auditing, and the tools and automation are there. As I mentioned before, a lot of this was being done in SQL, RPA, or Excel, and that wasn't really, it couldn't sit within the internal audit team, or it couldn't sit within the finance people. These are, you know, accountants and ex-auditors that are coming in and haven't been highly trained in all these technical tools. So that's a key, is how can we make this easy for the audit teams to deliver exponentially more work than they have been able to in the past in the areas of data-heavy process automation and analytics. So those are the kind of the trends we're seeing.
Right, and I really like that piece about how can you make it easy, right? Because there's definitely a lot of data, and it's probably one of the things that I want to know during this conversation at some point. So just before I call back Stijn quickly, again, just want to remind my audience, if they have any questions, please post them in the chat. Let us know, and we can try and tackle that question. Stijn, as I come back to you, I want to talk a bit more about kind of the critical success factors that you were looking into. So before going into a market, was your mind absolutely clear about what you wanted? Was it a case of perhaps shopping around and testing different services?
So I've used over the years a lot of different tools and a lot of different technologies, mostly because I was at a Big Four. You generally adopt the technology from the client that you're using it for. So you get a lot of exposure there, and in the external audits, we use also a variety of tools for a variety of different things. So you get quite a broad view of what is available. So if you're talking about success factors, or what drives the successful implementation of I think really any technology, then when you asked me that question, I had to think about it, and I came up with kind of 5 things. So the first, having a visible sponsorship and leadership. So really having vocal about that you want to drive this data, that you see the value, and that you actually have your leadership like really support that. I think that's very very important. Secondly, that you can collaborate and partner with other stakeholders. So in internal audit, it's not just other insurance providers and agreeing what technology you use and how you do that, but also leveraging what has been built in the business, because a lot of times a lot of things have been built, and you can leverage those data models, those views, or the solutions, and build on top of that. So I think that's the second one that's quite important. The third, that you need to have an empowered team. So besides just giving them the tools, you need to also give them the appropriate training and coaching to be able to use those tools. And that's why we kind of set up that those weekly sessions, including homework that they had to do in their own time to make sure that they understood, and that our weekly challenges where we gave them a datalytic data set and a question, and say, can you take this data and answer the question, which sometimes is quite some were quite difficult. The fourth one is really have a programmatic and phased approach. So understand what you want to do and break it up into little pieces, so everybody's clear about when what needs to happen and how you're going to do that, and then also of course track and monitor the progress of that over time. So in our case, we use a lot of DevOps for each of our data analytics projects, the larger ones, where we track what the deliverables are, and we break them down by user stories and individual tasks to really make sure that we, if we do all those tasks together, we really reach that objective. And the last one is clear and agreed data principles and a solution design. So how we're going to build it, how we're going to work with it, how do we make sure it stays secure, how do we what is the process that we adhere to process when you use privacy sensitive information, so all those kind of things, and then also when you use third parties, for example, if you know what your solution design would be, which tools you use and what structure are with that, to make sure that if you have third parties working for you, also that they follow those same rules, so that when they leave, you're actually not dependent on them anymore. You can just take it up into your normal piece of work.
Thanks, Stijn. I'm going to stay with you for the next point. Perhaps speaks to some of the work that you've been doing, and I wanted to know from a data analytics team and from a scaling ability. It's often difficult to scale. I think just given the amount of data that's out there as an organization or as a business or even as a team. How are you kind of navigating that part, when you want to move with agility that you'd spoken about earlier?
Yeah, it's really, I think that's where I spoke about that cycle, right? That you really scope those things that are important, because there's more analytics to do or more data to mine than you can ever imagine. So if you don't have an actual strategy and objective, you will just do things. So really try to, in audit, it's really like supporting those audits and tackling those high objectives. But I guess in finance, it wouldn't be much different. You would want to know, if you have a clear vision and strategy, then you can just translate it and how to execute it and what you specifically built for that. That being said, you do need to have kind of a foundation. So, where we said we want to bring those data together and have those common data models. Because if you don't have that, then you have to reinvent the wheel every time. You cannot just tap into the data that's available, but you need to make that available first to bring it into to get it out of, release it from the applications itself. So it's a bit of a two-pronged approach. So having a clear objective, but also making sure you take away that lead time by having data available.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from that, Stijn, I think the key things that I've just picked up is having that foundation, as you mentioned, but also kind of avoiding to reinvent the wheel, right? Because there's just a lot of data out there. I want to call back Pierre quickly, and Pierre, in one of the conversations, and I think you probably touched on on this earlier. We spoke about Dimago's focus is to drive digital transformation on the 3 pillars, and it was data, process, and people, right? So I think maybe there's an appetite to kind of understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's our core focus, and it really ends with the people. But where we first start looking at is what is a business trying to achieve with digital transformation, and that's like kind of 2 big buckets. Is it business outcomes? Is it growth, savings, and Stijn's world, the reduction of risk, and then also workplace outcomes, which are maybe overlooked sometimes, but absolutely important. How do we ensure efficient teams and that they're adding value and also that they're happier? We hear this a lot of unengaged and unhappy people just because they're spending so much time on these mundane processes that honestly, I mean, I've been in finance, I studied finance, been in audit, and I haven't seen really change in over 20 years. So we most often start with manual processes because that's where the grunt work and the most frustration really sits. So, start with processes out of the data processing people. What's your most complex and almost always Excel-based process? And we'll work with those auditors or internal auditors or finance teams or other people in business to automate these processes. As an example, we worked with not in Stijn's team, but another team in Anglo. A report that took somebody 12 hours every week to prepare. Typical, we hear very often a typical process, extracting data out of SAP into Excel, into Power BI to prepare a report visualization. And it took 12 hours every week. We got them to download Alteryx on their laptop, and we went through a process called guided workflow building, where we sit with them and, as Stijn does with his team, work through a use case. So we spent about 4 hours with this person and automated 12 hours of work. It took 12 hours a week, which ultimately freed up 4 months of time. So you ask what kind of ROI is there on automating processes? In one process we found, you save 4 months of effort, 4 months of work effort in a year. And just think what you can do with four months extra in your work life back. How much additional value are you going to add? Or you just don't have to stay and work 16 hours a day to get these processes done at month end or something like that. And that's the true outcome of this from a process point of view is a few years back at the Alteryx Inspire conference. It's actually coming up, and we'll send everyone invites to that as well. But they did one of the keynotes is what was the change in people's lives that they actually saw from being able to automate these processes. And people got to go home earlier, got to spend more time with their family. And that's the kind of workplace outcomes you can generate, right? So automating processes, it most often, always often starts there. How can we reduce the amount of time on non-value add tasks and just make your life a happier place to be in, really? So that's the process piece. Then we look at data. So how are people going to be adding more value, generating more insights, and using these technologies and capabilities that are there, machine learning, AI. Ultimately, we want to start skilling these users as what we call citizen data scientists. I think the term was coined by Gartner, and really means, it speaks to business users being trained up as data scientists to drive value through the use of machine learning and AI. And this is the democratization of data. When we talk data, process, people, we talk process automation, we talk democratization of data analytics, and it's totally possible. We're hearing more and more of this happening. We're hearing our clients the teams aren't hiring technical data scientists into their teams. So that means people trained in Python or R, because they're actually able to enable business users with the use of a tool like Alteryx. Another recent story from a client of ours is that they, within a couple of hours, couple of days of building out a model, they were able to deliver, and this wasn't a data scientist, was able to deliver data science results that were proven. So they actually went back and did it. They proved that, proved it on with their actual results a month later, that the model was actually working and accurate. That a team of data scientists weren't able to get right in a matter of months. And what I'm saying here isn't just anecdotal evidence that we see. It's actually backed up by a research paper that was done by MIT and summarized in a Harvard Business Review back in 2016. But we're starting to see shoots of note now. So that's about 5 years ago that they actually did this research. So I'll stick that link into the chat so everyone can have a read. But there were 4 main outcomes that came from this article. So just posted that link. So 4 main points. Stick with simple models. So you don't have to get these overly complex, highly experienced data scientists to build the most accurate and complex models. Stick with simple models. Explore more problems. And I think this references back to the last webinar we had with Sean Doherty from the CFO from Transaction Capital, where he's talking about how quickly you can go between learn and execute. So explore more problems. How do we get more people to explore more problems? Use small data sets. You don't have to have the largest, 10 years of history data sets of retail transactions to come up with insights. Start with small data sets and focus on automation. It's not necessary to build these models from scratch in R and Python. It's been done. They're available in a drag and drop and the mythical click of a button. So, and this talks to what we're doing, right? So simplifying analytics and driving value. And then people, as we've mentioned it before, that's the core is enabling people. Again, going back to Stijn's team, is that he's now got a team of 12 auditors that are actually able to execute on all the stuff that we've just spoken about. But saying that the governance, control, security around data absolutely have to be in place. And this is where that cross-functional engagement between IT and people in the business is critical. And we see this more and more as we start working with these self-service technologies. We actually start getting more collaboration between the IT and governance and control teams and business, and start working on data and together rather than sitting in distributed teams. So that's
So I just want to pick on the people piece there and call back Stijn. But before I do that, I see there's some questions that are in the chat. I'll address them quickly. But Stijn, Pierre spoke about kind of multiple data sources that would exist and the frustrations to kind of augment and pull out data from these. How are you working with that situation now? I mean, is it still a people frustration pain point for you since going on to Alteryx, or will that continue to exist? Just multiple sources of data that are housed in different places.
Yes and no. So yes, in the part of you still need to get access to the data, and you still need to find out where it sits, and you're still reliant on a database administrator to give you access, like create a user to get that access. So that will still always exist regardless of the tool. But connecting to it is fairly easy. As Pierre, you have a canvas, you put an input data tool, you select your source, and you only generally now have to set it up once. So if we connect to the data set once, we can then use that going forward every time, because we save that kind of on the server, those credentials. So you can actually not see the access credentials, so you can't see the password and the username, but you can see. You can get access to it if we give you access to that specific connection. So that makes it much easier to reuse your data connections. But yeah, initially setting it up is still painful. It will always be painful, I think.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that. And Stijn, a question for you. It's coming from Guana. He says that in this specific data analytics project, how soon did Anglo start seeing an ROI, and whether it was a tangible or intangible kind of return?
In the audit space, most of these things are intangible, right? So it's what Pierre mentioned is the lives of your people improve. That's one thing, because it costs them just less time to do the more transactional, mundaner task. But I think another part is we can just cover so much more scope. And when we build one solution, which normally we would have an audit and we use some data and you extract that and you do it for one business unit. But now actually we build an analytic and then we build right away on top of the solution with a data feed for all business units. So you can, especially our group-wide audits can then cover a whole breadth more, and we can cover more risk with the same amount of people. And that just gives much more comfort from an assurance point of view. So that's a main benefit. I think we should be moving in that direction. I think that we can, get that more, that continuous monitoring going. Otherwise, we're just standing still, I think.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pierre. I'm going to go to Pierre, but actually, let me do it this way, Stijn. There's a great question that's come in from Johan Rousseau that's in the chat. Let me put it in a two-part. I think it reads as a two-part question. So I'll start off with you, Stijn, before I go to Pierre. It speaks about setting up rules and tests and exceptions or continuous auditing and monitoring. The question is this dependent on the critical completeness of company policies? That's the first bit for Stijn, and then we'll go to Pierre for the second bit. Perhaps you can tell us what are the investment costs associated to set up and run some of these models.
Yeah, so considering the time, I'll keep it really short. We're based mostly on risks, right? So we test the risk and not necessarily the policy. You can use the policy as guidelines on your thresholds, for example, on when something is an exception or not. But a lot of times the risks are clear, so you try to build an analytic to try to visualize that risk. And in the beginning, you will see when you have lower maturity in policy, procedures, and processes, and even like in system data. So sometimes you feel like, I can't do any analytics because my data is crap. So I guess the first thing you then do is just build data quality checks and data quality tests, and then expose that and show like, these are what the actual issues are, and then give that back. So then they can improve that data, and then you can go from there and then actually start performing more meaningful analytics.
Pierre, over to you. I think we're talking,
sure.
Add to that and maybe look at investment.
Yeah, so for the investment piece, it's to start, as I mentioned before, it can work from a single person into a much bigger team, but just as an individual, you can get going for under 100,000 Rand, and that's everything, including the Alteryx designer cost, as well as some enablement and consulting time to get your first use case going, and that very often, most often will save a couple of days a month at least in processing, and that's just from a single use case, and it just basically just builds from there. So really, if you look at the overall cost of the people that are running these models on a monthly, weekly basis, it's really not a big cost to get going. Absolutely not.
All right, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. But before I let you go, I'm going to start off with Stijn quickly. Any closing remarks?
Oh, I think thanks for the invite. It was great, great being here, and thanks for everybody for listening.
Pierre, some closing remarks for you?
Yeah, thanks everyone. I think just from me, go back and have a look at your environment and what you do on a daily basis, and try and understand how much of that work could be automated. I mean, that's one of the first questions we always ask. Other leaders of finance teams or people in the finance team, is how much time they actually spend on mundane, repeatable work that they're needing to do over and over again. Have a look at that, quantify it, and understand and think about actually the process of automating that. And it's totally possible, as we've mentioned and been through today. So yeah, that's a task for everyone to go back and be interested in talking to everyone about that.
And there we go, mundane everyday work. How can you improve that? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Stijn from Anglo, and thank you, Pierre from Dimago, for an insightful session. And to the audience, thank you all for listening in and for the questions that you posted today. Have a very wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Yeah, bye.